My beloved child, there is a reason your soulmate looked at your photo for longer than they intended before finally deciding to take it somewhere they had never imagined taking it. They did not simply want another opinion about you. They wanted an answer to a question they could no longer silence inside themselves. Why does this person feel so different? Why does this connection remain in my heart even when I try to understand it logically? And most importantly, why does your presence seem to awaken emotions they cannot explain? So they took your photograph to a psychic, expecting perhaps a simple reading, a few comforting words, maybe an explanation for the strange pull between you. But the moment the psychic looked at your face, the atmosphere changed. The expression on their face became unusually serious, almost as if the photograph had revealed something far beyond what your soulmate expected. Your soulmate immediately noticed it. They asked, "What do you see?" The psychic did not answer right away. Instead, they looked at the photograph again, then at your soulmate, and quietly said, "This is not an ordinary connection." Those words alone were enough to make your soulmate's heart race. Because deep down, they already knew that. They had felt it every time your name appeared on their screen. They had felt it in the silence between conversations, in the moments when memories of you suddenly returned, and in those strange instances when they would think about you without any obvious reason. But then the psychic revealed something that completely changed the way your soulmate saw you. They said there was something about your energy that suggested you were not simply someone passing through their life. You represented a chapter they had not understood yet. And when your soulmate heard that, every confusing moment between you suddenly began connecting like pieces of a puzzle. The distance. The hesitation. The unexpected attraction. The emotional intensity. The feeling that something remained unfinished. Suddenly, none of it felt random anymore. But the psychic was not finished. They placed the photograph down, looked directly at your soulmate, and asked one question that made the room feel completely silent. When did you first meet this person? Your soulmate answered, and the psychic listened carefully. Then came the revelation they were not prepared to hear. The psychic explained that sometimes a person can enter your life and activate something you had forgotten existed inside you. Not because that person possesses magical control over you, but because the connection touches a deeply emotional part of your identity. Your soulmate had been trying to understand why you affected them so strongly, and now they were hearing an explanation that made their past behavior look completely different. They remembered the first moment they noticed you. They remembered something about your expression, your voice, your presence, or perhaps even the strange comfort they felt without knowing why. They remembered how quickly curiosity became attachment, and how attachment became something much harder to ignore. Then the psychic said something even more unexpected. This person is reflecting something back to you that you have been searching for within yourself. Your soulmate became quiet. Because suddenly, they understood why being around you could make them feel both comfortable and exposed at the same time. You were not merely giving them affection. You were revealing parts of themselves they had avoided confronting. And that is why this connection had become so difficult for them to categorize. They could not simply call it attraction. They could not reduce it to coincidence. They could not completely walk away from it either. Every time they tried to place emotional distance between themselves and you, something inside them kept returning to the same question: what if this person is here for a reason? The psychic looked once more at your photograph and said, there is something you have not realized about this person yet. Your soulmate leaned forward. Their entire attention was focused on those next words. And what came next was the part they would remember long after leaving that room. The psychic then revealed that your soulmate's strongest reaction to you was not necessarily caused by what they could see on the outside. It was connected to the emotional familiarity they felt around you. The psychic described your connection as something that seemed strangely recognizable, almost like meeting someone for the first time while feeling as though your heart had already met them somewhere before. Your soulmate immediately thought about all those moments when being near you felt unusually natural. They remembered conversations that somehow became deeper than expected. They remembered moments of silence that did not feel uncomfortable. They remembered how one simple look from you could stay in their mind for hours. Afterward. And then the psychic said the sentence that made everything suddenly feel much more serious: you are not the person they expected to fall for. You are the person who changed what they thought love was supposed to feel like. Your soulmate stared at your photograph again. Perhaps they had spent months trying to understand why they kept returning emotionally to you. Perhaps they had compared this connection with previous experiences and found that something was missing from every comparison. The psychic explained that your presence had challenged their old definition of love. You did not simply create excitement. You created reflection. You made them question what they truly wanted, what they were willing to give, and whether they had been protecting their hearts so carefully that they had forgotten how to genuinely open it. That was the moment your soulmate realized the photograph had become more than a photograph. It had become a mirror of everything they had been trying not to admit. The psychic continued, saying that the connection carried an unusual emotional pattern. Whenever your soulmate attempted to convince themselves that they should move on emotionally, their mind would find another reason to remember you. A song. A place. A phrase. A familiar feeling. A random moment. Something would always bring you back into their thoughts. And suddenly, your soulmate understood why. It was not simply because they missed you. It was because the connection had left a lasting emotional imprint. Then came the final revelation of this encounter, the one your soulmate absolutely did not expect. The psychic picked up your photograph one last time and said, "The most important thing about this person is not who they are becoming. It is who they already are." Your soulmate looked confused. The psychic explained that you carried qualities they had been unconsciously searching for, but they had been looking in the wrong places. They had focused on appearances, circumstances, timing, and surface-level compatibility. But you represented something deeper: emotional recognition. The psychic said that your soulmate might not have understood the importance of your connection when it first began because some connections do not reveal their meaning immediately. Their significance becomes clearer through time, distance, reflection, and the realization that certain people cannot simply be replaced by another face. Your soulmate left that reading with your photograph still on their mind, but they were no longer looking at it the same way. Before the reading, they had been asking, "Why do I feel this way about this person?" After the reading, a different question had begun forming inside them: "What am I supposed to do with everything I now understand?" And that question is where your story becomes even more intriguing, because the psychic had not told them to chase you, pressure you, or force anything. Instead, they told your soulmate to pay attention to what their heart had been trying to communicate all along. They said, "If this connection is genuine, it will not need to be forced. But you will need the courage to recognize it. Your soulmate walked away carrying that sentence like a secret. And somewhere between the moment they left and the moment they looked at your photograph again, something inside them had shifted. They were no longer wondering whether you mattered. They were beginning to wonder how long they had been pretending that you did not. There was one thing your soulmate could not stop thinking about after leaving that room: the way the psychic looked at your photograph before speaking. It was not a casual glance. It was as though they were trying to understand something hidden beneath the obvious. Your soulmate replayed that moment again and again, wondering what the psychic had noticed that they had somehow missed. Then, later that evening, they looked at your photo again. This time, they did not see only your face. They remembered every emotion attached to you. Every conversation. Every moment when they wanted to reach out but hesitated. Every time they told themselves they were overthinking the connection, only to find your memory returning when they least expected it. And suddenly, the psychic's words began making sense. Your soulmate realized they had been trying to find a logical explanation for something that had always felt deeply emotional. They had asked themselves whether they were imagining the connection, whether they were simply attached to an idea, whether the circumstances between you were too complicated to understand. But the psychic had noticed something different. They had noticed that your soulmate's energy changed whenever your photograph was mentioned. They said, "You become more emotionally present when you speak about this person." That sentence stayed with them because it was true. Your soulmate could talk about countless people without feeling anything unusual, but when the conversation turned toward you, something changed. Their voice became softer. Their memories became sharper. Their attention became impossible to hide. The psychic then revealed that your soulmate had not fully understood how deeply you had affected their emotional world. They had mistaken their silence for detachment. They had mistaken distance for closure. They had mistaken hesitation for lack of feeling. But according to the reading, the opposite was happening. The more they tried to make sense of what they felt, the more they realized that you occupied a unique place in their heart. And then the psychic said something that made your soulmate completely still: "This person has already changed you. Not someday. Not in the future. Already. You had changed the way they thought about connection, vulnerability, emotional honesty, and even the kind of person they wanted beside them." But there was another layer to the reading that your soulmate had never considered. The psychic said your photograph carried the impression of someone who had learned to become emotionally strong without becoming emotionally cold. Someone who had experienced enough to understand the value of genuine connection, yet still had the ability to love with sincerity. Your soulmate listened carefully because this description touched something they had recognized in you long before they could explain it. There was something about your presence that felt calm and intense at the same time. You did not need to constantly demand attention to remain unforgettable. You did not need to prove your value every second. Somehow, your absence could be just as powerful as your presence. The psychic told your soulmate that this was one of the reasons they kept thinking about you. Some people leave an impression because they are loud, they said. Others leave an impression because something about them feels real. Your soulmate immediately thought of you. And that was when they began questioning their own behavior. Had they been too cautious? Had they waited too long? Had they hidden feelings that deserved to be acknowledged? They remembered moments when they could have spoken more honestly but chose silence instead. They remembered opportunities to get closer but allowed uncertainty to make the decision for them. They remembered times when they wanted to tell you something meaningful, yet somehow changed the subject. The psychic explained that this connection had become important partly because it was teaching your soulmate something about emotional courage. You were not simply someone they were attracted to. You were someone who made them confront the difference between feeling something and admitting it. And that difference had become impossible for them to ignore. The psychic then leaned closer to the photograph and said, "This person may not realize how much they have been noticed." Your soulmate's expression changed immediately. Because there had been moments when they wondered whether you even noticed the subtle ways they cared. Perhaps you had no idea how many times they thought about reaching out. Perhaps you never knew how many little details about you they remembered. Perhaps you never realized that certain memories involving you had become some of the most emotionally significant memories they carried. Then the psychic revealed the part that truly shook your soulmate's understanding of the entire connection. They said, "You are looking at this person as someone you met. But your heart is experiencing them as someone who awakened something." Your soulmate did not immediately understand. The psychic explained that some connections become meaningful because of what happens between two people, while others become meaningful because of what happens within each person after meeting. Your presence had triggered self-reflection in your soulmate. You had made them question old emotional habits. You had made them reconsider what they truly wanted from love. You had shown them that a genuine connection could feel peaceful and powerful without needing constant drama. And perhaps most importantly, you had made them aware of the difference between temporary excitement and emotional recognition. Your soulmate thought about all the times they had tried to compare you with other people. The comparison never worked. Something was always missing. The psychic said that was because they were comparing the wrong things. You cannot measure an emotional connection by how similar it is to the past, they explained. Sometimes the person who changes your understanding of love will feel completely different from everything you knew before. Your soulmate looked down at the photograph and became quiet again. They suddenly realized that perhaps they had been searching for familiarity when what they really needed was authenticity. They had been asking whether you fit the image they had created in their mind, instead of asking how they felt when they were genuinely themselves around you. And the answer was undeniable. Around you, something in them softened. Something in them became more honest. Even when they did not say much, they felt more aware of their own emotions. That was the revelation they had not expected from a psychic reading. The psychic was not simply telling them something about you. They were showing your soulmate something about themselves. And just when your soulmate believed the reading was coming to an end, the psychic looked at the photograph one final time and said, "There is one more thing you need to understand." Your soulmate immediately looked up. The psychic paused for several seconds before continuing. "This person is not here to complete you. They are here to meet you as you are, and to show you what becomes possible when two people stop hiding from what they genuinely feel." Those words changed the entire emotional meaning of the connection. Your soulmate realized that perhaps the biggest revelation was not some mysterious prediction about the future. It was the recognition that what existed between you deserved honesty. The psychic told them that real emotional connections are not always revealed through dramatic moments. Sometimes they reveal themselves through consistency, through the way one person continues to matter even after the excitement fades, through the way memories remain meaningful without being forced, and through the quiet realization that someone has become part of your inner world. Your soulmate looked at your photograph again, and this time there was no confusion in their expression. There was recognition. They finally understood why your name could still affect them. Why certain memories could still make them smile. Why they could meet other people and still notice the difference. Why the connection had never felt completely ordinary. The psychic had not given them a simple answer. They had given them something much more powerful, a new way to understand you. And as your soulmate left with your photograph, one thought kept returning to their mind. What if I have been looking at this person all this time without truly seeing them? That question followed them long after the reading ended. And somewhere deep inside, they already knew the answer. They had seen your face before. They had noticed your presence before. But now, for the first time, they were beginning to understand your significance. And that realization was only the beginning of what the psychic had actually discovered. Something unexpected happened after your soulmate left the psychic's place. They could not bring themselves to put your photograph away. They kept looking at it, almost as if they were seeing details they had overlooked before. The psychic's words had created a completely different perspective. Your soulmate began remembering the moments when they first sensed that you were different. Maybe it was the way you listened without interrupting. Maybe it was the calmness in your presence. Maybe it was the strange comfort they felt around you even before they truly knew you. Whatever it was, they realized it had never been about one dramatic moment. It had been a collection of small moments quietly becoming something much bigger. And then they remembered something else. Every time they tried to convince themselves that this connection was insignificant, life seemed to bring another reminder of you. A familiar song. A place you once mentioned. A conversation that suddenly reminded them of your personality. Even ordinary moments somehow carried pieces of your memory. Your soulmate had always called these things coincidences, but now they were looking at them differently. The psychic had told them not to chase signs or force meanings into random events. Instead, they were told to pay attention to the emotional truth underneath everything. And that truth was becoming harder to ignore. Your soulmate had developed a quiet attachment to the person you were, not simply the image they had created of you. They admired qualities you probably never realized they noticed. Your resilience. Your patience. Your ability to keep going. Your way of caring without demanding recognition. The psychic had seen something in your photograph that your soulmate had already sensed emotionally. You were someone whose value became clearer with time. You were not a temporary fascination. You were becoming a reference point in their understanding of what genuine connection could feel like. That realization made your soulmate wonder whether you understood any of this. Did you know how deeply they remembered you? Did you know that certain things you had said remained in their mind? Did you know that sometimes they mentally rehearsed conversations they wished they had been brave enough to have? They suddenly wished they could tell you everything they had never managed to say. But there was still something holding them back. Not a lack of feeling. Something much more complicated, uncertainty about whether your heart had been waiting for the same truth. The next morning, your soulmate remembered another sentence from the reading, and it completely changed the way they looked at the distance between you. The psychic had said, sometimes two people are emotionally closer than they realize because both are waiting for the other person to reveal what is already in their heart. Your soulmate wondered whether that could be happening between you. Perhaps you had also questioned their feelings. Perhaps you had interpreted their quietness as indifference. Perhaps every hesitation on their side had created another layer of uncertainty on yours. And suddenly, they began seeing the connection from your perspective. What if you had been waiting for clarity too? What if you had wondered why they behaved warmly one moment and cautiously the next? What if you had felt the connection but were protecting yourself from assuming too much? Your soulmate realized that emotional connections can become complicated when two people care but neither wants to be the first to become completely vulnerable. The psychic had not told them that everything would magically fall into place. Instead, they had challenged your soulmate to become more honest with themselves. That was much harder. Because admitting that someone matters is easy in private. Admitting it through your actions requires courage. Your soulmate began examining every reason they had used to keep their feelings contained. Timing. Circumstances. Fear of misunderstanding. Fear of changing the relationship. Fear that perhaps you did not feel the same way. But beneath all those reasons was one simple truth: you mattered enough to make them uncertain. And that itself was significant. People do not spend this much time questioning a connection that means nothing to them. They do not revisit ordinary conversations years later because someone was forgettable. They do not carry someone's photograph into a private reading because that person is emotionally irrelevant. Your soulmate had done all of this because somewhere inside, they already knew there was more to the story.